You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
You all know Jill Wine-Banks, MSNBC legal analyst, author, podcaster, lifelong fighter, not just for our individual rights, but our collective rights as citizens in a democracy to a good and representative and responsible government that follows the rule of law. Jill, welcome back.
Thank you for having me back, Edwin.
So, I called you like 1 nanosecond after Joe Biden said the Equal Rights Amendment was actually part of the Constitution. I may have jumped the gun a little bit. So let's talk about that briefly or longer if it needs it. And then I want to talk to you about, the rule of law with these guys coming in.
Well, the Equal Rights Amendment is something that I have been fighting for since I was a youngster, basically. I was out of law school, and I was out of the government so that I was no longer under Hatch Act. It's been almost 50 years, and I'm really excited about what happened. The recognition that President Biden gave to the amendment is, I believe, legally correct. Under the Constitution, you amend the Constitution when you have a amendment proposed by both houses of Congress and passed by a 2/3 vote, and then by 3/4 of the states, it is ratified. This amendment was passed and it was ratified by the final 38th state in January of 2020. So that's now almost 5 years ago. The terms of the amendment said that it would become effective upon ratification 2 years thereafter. So that was 3 years ago. And it is time for the implementation. All that it takes is recognition that it's met all the requirements. The impediments to that recognition have been that originally Congress set a timeline. That timeline was in a preamble. It was not in what the states voted on. So it should have no legal effect or consequences. And I think it was a mistake for supporters of the amendment to try to get a joint resolution extending it, because that means that it must have been effective at some point. And I honestly, really, truly believe that it never was effective and that it didn't need extending. I understand politically why it would have been helpful to have a joint resolution extending the deadline. I also recognize the political reality that that is not going to happen. It would have been impossible to do. The other argument is that the Office of Legal Counsel has an opinion that says that you need the timeline removed. And it seems to me that someone should be looking at it again. Someone from President Biden's team should look at it, because there's a lot of legal experts who have written why that amendment, that Office of Legal Counsel memo is wrong. And I hope that as a final act that President Biden will withdraw the old OLC memo and replace it with one that coordinates with the opinion of many, many legal counsel from Lawrence Tribe on down, and that it will be enforced. There's even, by the way, the big deal was whether the archivist has to publish it. And the archivist, before Biden said anything, said she wouldn't. She was relying on the OLC memo. I think what President Biden did was, in effect, eliminate the OLC memo, and that the archivist has no ability not to publish it now. It is a ministerial act. It's not a discretionary act. And the President of the United States has said that it is fully ratified and should go into effect, that it should be the law of the land. I don't think that the archivist should refuse anymore, and if she does, he should fire her. Donald Trump said he was going to fire her, by the way, but that was because of a wrong facts. He wants to blame her for what happened in the search at Mar-a-Lago for the archives notifying law enforcement that documents hadn't been returned. But it wasn't her. She was not in office at the time. It was her predecessor. So he's firing the wrong person.
God, so he's an idiot. But on this issue, so Jill, if I go and Google how many amendments are to the Constitution, it's going to tell me 27, not 28. And right. But what you're telling me is no, there are 28 now. So now America has a different point of view about not just what the Constitution means, but literally what it says. Where some of us are going to say, yeah, there's a 28th Amendment and it is law, and some aren't. I guess the Supreme Court has no role in determining whether it's in there or not, but I assume that somebody is going to sue saying their rights were violated and cite the 28th Amendment, and the courts are going to have to figure out how to deal with that.
Right. And, if we can get political, the people who are arguing against it in the early era was, we don't want unisex bathrooms, which, of course, we now have, and nobody's upset about it. We don't want women to be drafted. Well, we don't have a draft, and women are fully integrated into the military and doing very well, although if we talk about confirmation hearings, the new set def might prove to be a problem. The argument now is that it will justify abortion, that it will legalize abortion. And honestly, I'm not sure that the 28th Amendment will have any impact on whether courts uphold abortions or not. I don't see that this is a discrimination based on sex. Yes, it's true, only one sex can have babies. And let's not get into the woke language of whether trans men can have babies because they are biologically female. Yes, of course they can. And so any person who can have a child could have an abortion if there was some legal protection. But I don't see how this is a sex-based discrimination. It is a physical-based discrimination. And so maybe. But the argument against it on the basis of abortion is not one that I think should hold much weight.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating. The idea that America today doesn't know how many amendments we have in our Constitution and because of this is stunning. It's just, we enter this era with so much up in the air. I wish Joe had ordered the archivist to publish it, like on day one, not as he was walking out the door, so that we would have had time to figure this out while there was time to think.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I wish it had been done earlier. I don't think he needs to instruct her to do it because publication is not required to make it effective. It isn't. Of course, you're right. If you look at Google, it would help to have it published so that it would be included, but it's not necessary. It is not legally required that the archivist do anything.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing when the curricula of law schools, in their common law classes, says there's a 28th Amendment. Here's what it says. Yeah, because
I'm waiting for someone to sue in court under that amendment. And
me too.
Vindicate their rights. Women have, 100 years ago, we got the 19th Amendment, which gave us the right to vote. That is the only time in the Constitution that women have any rights. And I'm a full person who needs rights to get credit, to get loans. I need my rights to do everything that any man can do, to serve on juries.
That's exactly right.
All of those things are essential, and we need this amendment because otherwise we are not protected.
That is correct. Absolutely correct. All right. Well, Jill, it'll be interesting to watch. I don't have standing to sue on this, otherwise I would. And I think, I would sue law schools to say, why aren't you teaching this in your curriculum?
Right.
There are other places to go to.
Or some woman is going to get fired and say it was on the basis of sex. and will therefore have
not
some
get a raise. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And the reason, let me just say, we need it because I'm very fearful of the upcoming Monday and the 4 years that follow it. And I'm worried about things like Title VII, which gives us a statute that gives women some rights, being abolished by the Trump administration. They are not woman-friendly. If that's abolished, that's it. There's nothing. If there's a constitutional amendment, they can't get rid of it, and they'll have to allow women to have certain rights. So that's why we need it. There are a lot of things that people might, we have the EEOC and we have Title VII. That's not enough. Those things can go away, and the Constitution doesn't go away.
I think you've talked about this too. In our lifetimes, right? Women couldn't get credit cards. They couldn't rent an apartment. They couldn't do anything without the man saying, and that's just appalling. And the only thing that changed in that are statutes that can be repealed. So you're absolutely right. We need it built into the structure of the country.
It's important. It really, really is important. And I don't trust this incoming administration or any of its cabinet nominees to protect the rights of any of women, who are a majority, and of any minority.
So let's talk about Pam Bondi. So Donald Trump initially appointed this terrible man
Matt Gaetz,
who the country said, you got to be kidding me. And even Congress threw up all over that one because they know him. And so Trump was defeated on that. But he didn't learn any lessons. So he picked Pam Bondi. Is Pam Bondi going to put the rule of law ahead of the abuse? Is she going to be our lawyer, the country's lawyer, and with the Constitution behind her, or is she going to be Trump's fixer sitting in the Justice Department?
The latter. Let me say, I listened to many of the confirmation hearings, but I listened to all of Pam Bondi's and all of Pete Hegseth because I was General Counsel of the Army and I care greatly about the Pentagon. So let's talk about both of them if we can, but I'll answer your question on Bondi. Bondi, first of all, Matt Gaetz may have been nominated so that attention would be focused on him and Congress would get rid of him. And he was forced to withdraw because it was clear he wasn't going to get confirmed. And then, we did one. We don't have to do any more. That, if I'm cynical, that's how I feel about it, that it was a deliberate ploy to make the others seem acceptable. Yep. Exactly. So now, he had no qualifications for this job. His practice of law was minuscule, never involved court. I mean, he was completely unqualified. Pam Bondi's
his practice
resume
of crime was
on
bigger
paper,
than his practice of law. Yeah.
Yes, it was. That's a good one. Pam Bondi, if you look at her resume, was a state prosecutor at a county level for, I think, 18 years, and then 8 years as the attorney general of the state, an elected attorney general for 2 terms. She has supervised lawyers, although a small number, but more than most attorney generals. And so she is qualified. She has a lot of trial experience.
Absolutely right.
And so on paper, she's qualified. I just wrote an op-ed, an opinion piece for U.S. News and World Report, which I hope all of your listeners will look up online. And I said she is not qualified to be the Attorney General for several reasons. One is because she does appear, and from her hearings it was obvious that she would be a yes man for Donald Trump. 2, because she displayed the most inappropriate temperament to be the Attorney General. There will certainly be no bipartisan working with Democrats in her administration. She spoke over particularly Senators Padilla and Schiff and Hirano. she was snide and sarcastic. She said to Hirano, "You're the only one who wouldn't even meet with me," and then Hirano said, "That's because I wanted your answers under oath," which is a pretty good comeback, but we shouldn't be at that level. She spoke over Schiff, and then he was asking her a non-hypothetical question, which was, sitting here today, do you have any facts that you can point to that would justify, I don't remember what the particular thing was, and she said, well, that's hypothetical. And he said, it's not hypothetical. I'm asking you whether you have any facts today that, it was to go after Jack Smith. And then she said, I would go after you because your state has such high criminal. I mean, what kind of answer is that? What kind of behavior? And she yelled at Senator Padilla, who was asking her about birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment, which is something that Donald Trump said he wants to eliminate. And she said, I'm not doing your homework for you. Well, she said, I have to study the 14th Amendment. And he said rightly, you're going to be the Attorney General and you're just first going to have to study the 14th Amendment? That doesn't give me much confidence. So it was her behavior of hostility and sarcasm. You know, we have certain rules of behavior, and it's my learned friend in court is what you say. You don't say my opponent. And it just upset me dramatically and made me think this woman cannot be the Attorney General.
Many Americans aren't old enough to remember the real damage a corrupt Attorney General can do to America. And I frankly think Bill Barr was a corrupt Attorney General, but he got away with a lot of it. But you have to think back to an era that you remember really well, John Mitchell, to understand what
Who went to jail? Who went to jail? Right, he went to jail. Right.
Yeah.
Richard Kleindienst was indicted. I mean, there was a lot of bad stuff going on. Mardian was convicted.
Yep, we're there. I mean, it's very dangerous to the rule of law, not to Democrats or Republicans, but to the foundation of the rule of law and the democracy when you weaponize the justice. And I know that's what they've accused Democrats of doing. I don't think the facts support that accusation, but they are planning it in front of us.
Yes. And there is a very big difference, if I could say, between prosecuting Donald Trump on the evidence that was apparent to everyone who would listen to the facts and looking at the accusations against Biden, against Schiff, against Smith, against Cheney. They have done nothing wrong, and they can't point to anything. They had an investigation of Biden and of Hunter Biden, and they were accusing them of taking foreign bribes. And the person who made the accusation is now in jail for perjury. He made it up. So it's appalling to me that you could have a serious discussion of this, and yet I know that there are many people who still believe the big lie, including Pam Bondi. Let's not forget that she is an election denier. And that was another issue in her confirmation hearing where she was being asked about, do you admit that Donald Trump lost and that Joe Biden won the election? And she said, I will say that Joe Biden is the president.
Yeah.
She would not admit that he won the presidency. She simply wouldn't. She said, I saw things in Pennsylvania. What things? She can't say because there are no things. And because 60 lawsuits were thrown out because they made accusations that couldn't be backed up. Rudy Giuliani, aside from having defamed people and having lost everything financially to the victims of his defamation, has been disbarred because of saying those things in court. She's lucky she only said them under oath. if she had said them in court, she would be disbarred for the election denialism. So that's really bad. But I'll answer any questions about Bondi, but if not, I really would love to say something about Hegseth, who is so completely unqualified.
Too, and I am horrified by what I saw. Yeah,
I mean, aside from the fact that he is a multiple philanderer, which personally that's personal and I don't care. That's up to him. It echoes his boss, the President of the United States, and so you can see why that would be a qualification in Donald Trump's mind. But he ran into the ground 2 not-for-profits that he ran. He has never supervised anything bigger than a few hundred people. And he's going to be given 3 million people and somewhere between $500 and $800 billion in procurements to handle. He can't manage money. He bankrupted organizations. And what is his qualification? He's a weekend anchor on Fox News. That's absurd. He was asked by Tammy Duckworth, our senator, about things he would have to do as Secretary of Defense, including work with ASEAN. He couldn't name a single member country of that organization. He said China and Japan.
I didn't think we handled those questions too well, actually.
Well, what? You didn't think that was a legitimate question to ask him about people you have to negotiate?
I thought that was.
Oh, okay.
I did. But I think most of the questions were not as useful as they could have been.
So what would you have asked?
Will you refuse to send troops to fight a war Congress hasn't declared?
Good question.
Right? Donald Trump is talking about deploying the army to Greenland, for gosh sakes, or to Panama. We don't, this isn't, will you refuse to any order under any circumstances to send the U.S. Army into American cities?
Yeah, and he was asked about shooting people.
And he didn't really answer it either.
He could not refused to answer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Every difficult answer he said was, well, that's going to be the president's call. And if that's the case, then we know why he's there. Whatever Donald Trump says he should do with the army, with the most lethal force in the world, he's going to try and order them to do. Thank goodness the members of the military are better trained than that. I think most of them will refuse.
Yeah, I think they will. I was, as General Counsel of the Army, I have a great interest in his remarks about women in the military, and I also was General Counsel of the Panama Canal Corporation. So I also am concerned about what he's saying about the Panama Canal, which we never owned. We had a 100-year lease in exchange for building it, and our lease expired. Yeah,
right. And Carter wisely negotiated a deal early so that we could get some extra rights.
Exactly, including priority rights for our naval ships to go through the canal. Very important and very good. And we would have had no such right if Carter hadn't done that. So that was while I was General Counsel. It's horrendous. Also during the Carter administration is when women were integrated into basic training, were integrated into the military academies. MOSs, which are military occupational specialties or job categories, were opened based on physical ability, so that if you wanted to be a radio operator, you had to show that you could carry a 100-pound radio for a certain number of miles. And many men can't do that, and many women can. So women who could are qualified, men who can't aren't. It used to be only for the regular Army. We eliminated the Women's Army Corps and integrated women into the regular Army. That meant that women could be generals other than the general who headed the Women's Army Corps and the Nursing Corps. You now have many women, including a 4-star, which didn't exist in those days. it's a remarkable achievement. Women have served in combat. How we could say in front of Tammy Duckworth on that committee, who was in combat and lost her legs because of it, it's astounding. And how Joni Ernst, who is a veteran, could support him is astounding to me. I don't know what President Trump has on these people or what influence he has, or I don't get it. He isn't qualified.
Well, and the perniciousness of the lie about women that went this way. Oh, I'm all for women, but we have to have high standards, as if women aren't meeting the standards. They didn't lower the standards for women, and they didn't create a separate set of standards for women. That is a lie. And
thank you for pointing that out.
And I thought Congress, these guys let him off the hook on that. He said, oh, well, they've lowered the standards, or they had quotas that mean they have to, and there are no quotas. You can't find an order on a quota anywhere. And he should have said, find one. We'll take a break right now. You come back with that order. We don't have to do one more thing. You find it, you lying thug. But that's what they do.
I wish you had said what you were thinking. Yes, there is absolutely physical requirements, and you can't be in a job unless you meet the physical, legitimate requirements. This isn't saying if you're going to be a drone operator, you have to carry 100 pounds, because be a drone operator, you don't. You need certain hand-eye coordination
skills. The requirements have to fit the job. Yes,
exactly. And that's what we started doing in the Carter administration, was exactly that. I was also recently on a panel not recently, it was in the Obama administration.
Oh, Jill, this is going to be the last comment, because I was looking up and we are running into the news. So.
Oh, God. It was looking at sexual assault in the military. And one of the panels who testified was 4 generals and 1 admiral, and the lowest ranking was a brigadier, 1 star, and that was the only man on the panel. And so women have moved right up the ranks where they deserve to be, and we don't need that undone by Pete Hegseth.
Well, I don't think he's going to be able to undo it. I think he's going to be just shown to be incompetent, and the military will work around him. It's a complicated institution for sure.
It's true, but you are right that the Democrats did a bad job. They haven't persuaded witnesses to come forward, and that's the problem.
Yep. All right, Jill, thank you so much, as always.
Thank you, Edwin.
Yep.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody, that was the incomparable Jill Wine-Banks, and I should have had more time. We're going to take a break for the news, and David Pepper's joining me when we come back.